press conference rooms to make sure you guys are reading the emails, and then all of us just went down to the first floor and walked up to the second, so I can read my own emails. All right, thank you guys so much for being here. Had a great, and apologies for missing last week. Had a great week at the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Washington, D.C., and was able to learn a lot through that experience, and build a lot of relationships at the federal level, not only with some of the leaders of those organizations, but of course also other mayors, and the mayors of every city, every large city in the United States were there, and heard from the Attorney General, heard from Secretary of Transportation, and then of course there's about 250 mayors. We all went to the White House on Friday and got to hear about the infrastructure bill coming down from the person who's going to administer it, as well as the President and the President of the United States. And really the key takeaway that we heard was that everyone at the federal level really understands that mayors and cities, municipalities are the first line of defense to the taxpayer. When disaster strikes, when something happens, we at the city or at the county, at the local level, we're really the first call. And so they're doing, the administration's doing everything that they can to make sure that we're empowered, be it how we're funded, and trying to make that easier to see those funds get to the front lines. But they're very mindful of that, and they understand that here at the city level is where change can really happen quickly. So that was encouraging to hear. A few updates I want to get through today. First, on the Baptist Hospital tax credit project, unfortunately, on both the 9% and 4% tax credit, those projects were not selected. Obviously, as we talked about before, it was very competitive. There were 50 for the 9% credit project. There were 52 applications and 8 were chosen. So, 44 of the 52 are saying the same thing that we're saying right now. And then there were 46 applications even for the 4% credit, and only 8 of those were recommended for funding. So it really it's extremely competitive, as we've said all along, and it's not unusual for developers to have to submit multiple years. There's plenty of precedent for that. In fact, almost customary. But it had nothing to do with the strength of the applications. Nothing that we would have not had in our project that someone else would have had that we could control. And that's where we're at. And where we go from here is we'll assess what happens. There's a lot of moving parts and variables to where we go. Obviously the developer, how does this change their project? The city on the 9% side can only choose one of these per year. They are moving up the application deadline to September, October. But I would just say right now, we don't know where we go from here at this point. Certainly, we're always going to look at every opportunity we have to support attainable housing in the community, and that won't change. It's just a matter of kind of getting our feet back under us and reassess what's the best next step forward. In terms of the funding itself, I would imagine even if this project was reapplied for and this was the project we selected to support, that this would probably have to come back for a vote, since the vote was on this particular project. So even if we were to do exactly what we did this year, or I'm sorry, in 2022 and 2023, there's going to be some moving parts and some decisions to be made on that as well. So don't want to come across as evasive to what the next step is. I think we just really need to be able to assess that. So obviously we will be active and we'll stay in the annual tax credit application cycle regardless. That's the one thing I can guarantee is we'll have something in there. We'll just need to assess what's the best step for the city. Airport improvements. The Pensacola International Airport will begin the first upgrades this month as part of our airport modernization and expansion, starting with terminal renovations. And I stick to what I think our airport director, Matt Coughlin, describes it very well when he says, when we eventually have this new terminal, which will be such a game changer for us, knowing that we're bursting at the seams out at the airport, What we don't want is, when you go to airports and you see the beautiful new terminal and then, the outdated, unkept old terminal. We don't want to find ourselves in that situation. So what we can't build the terminal tomorrow, but what we can control is making sure that we keep our current airport terminal, great for our customers, great for our citizens, our visitors, and make sure that we continue to hold that to a high standard. So that makes the transition to a new terminal that much easier. And so you'll start to see that over the coming months as more and more updates, modernizations, improvements to the airport. Congratulations to a couple folks in existing employees, but in new promoted positions. Daryl Singleton, you saw at the last council meeting, is now the Director of Pensacola Energy. We're fortunate to have him. He's been with the city 27 years. You talk about doing succession planning right. Pensacola Energy has done that. We've been able to have veteran leadership across the board. As mayor coming in, as a new mayor, it's certainly very comforting to know that when you run an enterprise of that size, to be able to have Don Suarez and then to follow right back up, and they continue to have a great veteran stable of folks at the top of Pensacola Energy that makes you very, very comfortable that we know the direction that we're going and we know how to continue to operate at a high level. So glad to have Daryl in that position, as well as Derek Pratt is our new Deputy Fire Chief of Operations at the Pensacola Fire Department. So a promotion for him, again, very well deserved. I've gotten to spend a little bit of time with him. I told you guys in November I wanted to meet with every firefighter and every police officer, and so a lot of those meetings were taking place at the airport station where Derek was, and you can tell he's got a great handle on the culture with the guys there. They run a great operation out there at the airport, and that was just part of what he was doing, but certainly very glad to have Derek in an expanded role as well. A few other quick notes, and happy to take some questions. The District 7, my first town hall meeting is District 7, January 26th. I promise we didn't pick it because I can walk there from my house. That's just how the order is gone. But we'll be there with Councilman Wiggins, Council President, this Thursday, January 26th at 5:30. So we'll be at the Sanders Beach Corinne Jones Resource Center, 913 South I Street. And so we will have some of our staff there as well. I've asked Mark Jackson to be there, who's really been heading up our American Creosote Works, our conversations with the federal level that I've been part of, and he's really had a handle on it. I imagine that there'll be some questions in Sanders Beach about the future of ACW and what's going to happen with those 18 acres. So in addition to our solid group of our department directors, we'll have him on hand to be able to answer some of those questions that we expect that we'll have there. Shoots the Cube, the public art unveiling, we'll continue to try to not pick a day where there's severe weather, and that's my next update, but that unveiling now will be Friday, January 27th at 4 p.m. and at Avalon Mason Park, 200 South 9th Avenue. So we've been unlucky in our unveiling weather days. I believe this is our third attempt, so we'll finally get that done. Severe weather, obviously, I'm sure you're hearing it from your local media to the county or to the city, but we'll continue to make sure that everybody in the city is aware of the severe weather coming this evening through tomorrow morning. We're in enhanced risk for severe weather, potential for damaging wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour and possible tornadoes. And a high wind warning is also in effect for our area this evening through late tonight, with damaging wind gusts over 50 miles possible. So just make sure you have ways to receive these warnings, and certainly check your trusted weather app, website, and make sure that you stay close and that you're vigilant and paying attention to if you're going to be out in your car or have any plans that are supposed to be outdoors this afternoon, this evening, certainly make sure you keep a very, very close eye on that. And I think that is it for me. Any questions?
Yeah. On the tax credit program, have you had a chance to talk with Baptist hospital officials yet? And what have y'all talked about?
Briefly, we obviously wanted to update them that everybody was aware of the decision that was made, and certainly so we wanted to make sure they were aware we were going to be discussing it today. But to the extent that we've decided what we're going to do next, I would say we have not delved into those kind of details at this point. But our housing department has been in close contact with Jen and Mark and everybody over at Baptist, and we'll continue to do that. I'm sure we'll formulate our next path forward from here. I thought you had one. Sorry.
Oh, with the city exception of UWF archaeology, Margaret Springfield, what background was the city looking for in the Morales Park Barrier Study Committee?
Sure. So, and I'm glad you asked. I want to clarify a couple things on that. We have gotten some questions. First, there's really two groups of people looking at this study. One is the more technical group, the experts that understand all of the science and the archaeology that certainly just citizens of our community, that your mayor doesn't understand, the technical aspects of where we go from here, which is a great group. Adrian Walker, who you heard from before, is our point person at the city. But these are folks from the University of West Florida. We can get you a list of those. So I think there was some confusion as to that we have a citizens advisory group that's going to help me decide, as we digest this information, how do we best commemorate, how do we best if we're going to re-intern human remains we found, how do we best handle that as a community? So that's what the community group is for. But that is not also the technical group that is going to be truly on the front lines of gathering this information, doing these studies, and all that. So to your question about the community group, we were looking for a diverse group of skill sets, of responsibilities within their community, of personal connection to the park itself. There's some folks, multiple folks on there that have that. As I said, understanding that we've got amazing people at the University of West Florida and others that are going to be hand in hand with us studying this, the scientific part of it. These are people that we wanted to have a personal connection to the park itself, a personal connection to our history, personal connection to our African American history in our community, and so I think we were able to accomplish that with a pretty diverse group across all of those fronts that will ultimately come back and make some recommendations to my office to say, we've gotten the information from our technical experts. This is, given that, this is what we recommend as the path forward.
Any plans of retaining people from the funeral industry that's in the funeral home business to be on this committee?
We didn't look at it that way in terms of by an occupation or anything like that. It's as I said, we feel good about and look, you can go to citypensacola.com/Mayor-Flores. We're happy to take feedback from everybody. What I can guarantee you is going to happen during this process is someone who either lives out of town or used to live here that has a personal connection, a personal story about the Boy Scout building or something else. We are always open-minded to take feedback from anyone. So this is not the goal of creating a committee like this is for more openness and transparency. It's not for less. Right. So because you aren't on this group, that doesn't mean we're happy to hear, and certainly that group is happy to hear. Those meetings will be in the sunshine. There'll be opportunity for public comment. So the goal of the thing is not to eliminate voices. It's to build those voices up and to give our community a voice as a whole. So even if it's not someone that not everybody can be on this group, but we're more than happy, and I can speak for Adrian and say we are more than happy to hear the personal stories, the expertise that's out there in our community that can help us make sure that we're honoring and commemorating this correctly.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I want to ask you about parking in downtown Pensacola. Do you believe that the city management working with the private partners, do you think parking is as good as it can be in terms of customer satisfaction and, all the things that go into a vibrant downtown?
Sure. I think, look, we've got a lot of strengths here. I'm actually going to have this conversation with all of our department heads today about the idea, what we've tried to do is come in these last few months and assess. We've got a transition report now in our hands. I've asked for feedback from our department heads of what's going well, what are opportunities for improvement. So I don't think any department director, I don't think Lisa in parking, I don't think your mayor will stand in front of you and say, we got it all figured out. I think we should always be coachable, and I think we're always looking for opportunities for improvement. That being said, understand that our parking department, we've had great conversations with them. They are, I would squarely put them in that category of saying that we're talking about discussing potential improvements. I was at the Civicon a couple years ago when Donald Shoup was in town. He's the czar of parking in the United States, and one conversation we've had at parking is, hey, we've got these free parking spaces on Palafox, and then they're charged behind. That's kind of the opposite of what it should be. Your most premium parking should be the most expensive, and so we talk about those things all the time. But Lisa and the parking folks have been great. We had a great year in terms of revenue, and one thing that we're all in agreement on is when you're paying a user fee for anything at the city, and I consider parking a user fee, we want it to be a great customer experience, and we want you to show the value that we provide. And I think that's one of our big opportunities, and we're working on that here in the next couple months, is to say, hey, here's where your parking money is going. So we're not just trying to take a couple dollars from you. We owe you as a taxpayer, we owe you as a citizen, as a visitor that's paying a parking fee. We owe you, in some cities put in benches, they beautify sidewalks, that's really our charge right now, is to say, hey resident, let me show you what you get for your parking money. And I think that is a good first step for us. But I think we can always improve it. One great improvement coming, you'll hear more about it in February, but by March 1st, we're gonna, the text to pay option will be available with our city parking, and obviously we're gonna have a big marketing push for that to make sure people are aware. I think that just goes to show you another example of, we don't have anybody here saying we got it all figured out. I think our staff works really hard and they do a really good job, and the steps, the process might be incremental, but we don't rest on our laurels and think we got it figured out. I think our folks in the mayor's office, the administration, is doing a great job of continuing to push that envelope and improve the customer experience.
How do you measure success in a municipal parking program?
Yeah,
revenue collected do we do this just for the revenue, or are there other reasons we charge for parking?
Well, what I'd say on parking is, obviously, if you were running long-term, if you're running a parking management, if you were managing your own as a city and you weren't making any revenue, then it stands to reason, what is the use? Of course, it's supposed to be a revenue generator. But again, where cities have been very successful, in Pasadena is the example that Donald Shoup uses a lot, is they had a pretty derelict downtown in the 70s, and parking was free. And then you think it sounds backwards to say, well, then they started charging for parking. Well, what happened is when they were utilizing those funds in the correct way, and it was profitable enough, and it started to change the look of downtown, well, more people wanted to lease the storefronts, more people wanted, so I think I am committed to that the paid parking element is the direction that we're going to go. But what I want us to do as a city is do a good job of explaining, here's the funds that we brought in, and here's where they're going to help improve your experience. So I do think we owe that, and we've had several conversations about that, and even before, even during the campaign when I was just kind of fact finding, we had this conversation to say, I think we've got to set the value of why you're paying for parking, not just charge you just to charge you. So yes, we how do we measure it? I feel like revenue is always going to be a piece of it. Obviously, customer satisfaction is going to be a piece of it. That's a little complex because we've got private. If I could, have a hat that says red lots are private, blue lots are city, I would wear it. But we get a lot of those phone calls. I was handling emails this weekend while it was in Washington D.C. with someone sending me a thing about a parking ticket that wasn't ours. So that always adds complexity to it. But we want to make it as seamless a thing as possible. I knocked a lot of doors, probably 2,500 doors in the campaign, and as I shared with our folks, one of the things I heard the most, especially from some of the older folks in our community, was, hey, I don't feel like going downtown because of that parking, is a challenge. And what's interesting about that is I really think it's less, what we charge, 50 cents an hour, what we charge is not the make or break. To be honest with you, that's something we need to assess if that even makes sense for it to be that low. But what that told me, how I read that, is the communication and the ease has to be. So sometimes we mistranslate cost, where really, if it was easier on everybody, if people had a text-to-pay option, then all of a sudden, maybe it's a little less about the cost and maybe it's a little more about the experience. So those are things that we challenge ourselves on every day. And I can say we are working with urgency, and our parking department is doing a great job of working with urgency to make sure that we're improving those experiences. Anything else?
Just something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Waiting on Palafor's market expansion.
Yeah.
Can you give us an update on that?
Sure. So we are working on an opportunity to, I mentioned this during the campaign and right after, the ability to open up Plaza Ferdinand to Palafox Market. If you read the ordinance of Plaza Ferdinand, obviously, there's a lot of history in that part, but how I would assess it is, there's been, maybe a little bit of an overreach of restrictive use of that park. And what do we say? We want to be placemakers. We want to build a sense of place. Downtown Improvement Board has a list of 60 plus people ready for a booth. So what does that mean? We've got the demand. And here we have a park in the heart of our downtown that would not only enhance the public's experience, the residents' experience, but also I think it helps connect. That doesn't change where the market would be now. You'd have that. You'd have additional. There are obviously things we have to be very mindful of. Our tree canopy there, making sure that more folks going through. We've looked at making sure that that customers are only on the sidewalks, and so there's some nuance to it that we're working through. But we feel like I don't want to commit to which meeting, but I would say we're getting pretty close to the finish line, working out some tweaks to the ordinance as well as an interlocal agreement with the Downtown Improvement Board that they'd be able to have Palafox Market down there on Saturday. So just to clarify, that doesn't mean we're going to go from very, very restricted use to anybody can rent it anytime. Again, incremental steps. Let's take this park that's relatively unactivated. Let's activate it. Let's learn from that. And that's kind of the open conversation I've had with Walker at DIB, is to say, hey, we may assess this in 6 months and have to make a little bit of a tweak to it. How many booths can be there? What time? What time is cleanup? All those kinds of things. So we're really kind of treating this, when I say a pilot project, we've got pent up demand. This is something that I'm very committed to, but this is going to be our first step towards activating a treasure in our downtown and activating the heart of our downtown. And so it's something that I've been committed to for months and months of time. I'm glad, and I thank our Charlie and our legal team of working through that. It is a pretty complex ordinance right now, and so it's taking a little extra legwork, and I give them a lot of credit for making sure that we got that.
What are you hearing from the port on the Warehouse 4 idea?
Yeah, so still continues. Our delay has been around lot lines. Not a disagreement, just there's been a lot of iterations of this, conversations going to the previous administration. So actually touch base with the other side, the group today, this morning, and they, again, we feel confident and they feel confident that, we've got a good understanding. They just, when those change a little bit, maybe they had to do a little redesign on what happens outside. So I still feel very confident that that's moving forward, and I still remain as committed to making that happen as we have since the first time we talked about it.
Yeah, can you give us the update on the statues removed for locations plan for the statues removed from the Florida Square in 2020?
I can't give you an update on that. Happy to follow up. Just this, previous administration, and I just wouldn't want to speak to something. I'm not positive on that, but feel free to email us, and I'll get you more information. Anything else? All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.